Hello and welcome to Whisky.com, where fine spirits meet. And today I'm at the Glenmorangie Distillery, and if you followed the Whisky.com news, then you heard about the Glenmorangie Lighthouse. And today I'm standing here with Ludo Ducron, and you've been in the whiskey industry for 22 years, 3 years now with Glenmorangie, so tons of experience here. Thank you very much for having us here.
It's great to be here. Thanks for coming to see us.
Yes, and so there's been a lot of talk about the Lighthouse. For somebody who has not heard about it, what is the Lighthouse? What is it for?
So the Lighthouse is our new experimental distillery.
Okay.
We have a history of experimenting at Glenmorangie, where we're famous for trying different types of casks in particular. In the past, we've tried playing with different things like different yeast strains. We've also experimented with different types of malted barley. But the original distillery is not really built as a distillery where you can experiment easily. It's a distillery that's been built for a specific purpose, which is to make great new mix spirit for the Glenmorangie range. And we find that if we want to take things further and try lots of different things, which we've always wanted to try, we thought that the existing distillery was not the best tool for this. So we thought, well, why not build a new distillery designed specifically for experimenting? And this is what the Glenmorangie Lighthouse is all about.
Oh, okay. So it's a distillery. It's kind of a laboratory distillery then.
Very much so, yes. Maybe
I think we should hold them.
So very much so, yes. So it's been designed with lots of things in there which we can tweak in order to create lots of different styles. So you're probably going to ask me for examples of exactly what goes on in there. And so we're able to do a lot of things around temperature. So we're able to control the temperature of fermentation, for example. We've got new things that we've added to the stills as well, which will allow us to control the temperature inside the stills, which will allow us to play with reflux, so that will allow us to create different styles of spirit. We'll also be able to play with different types of cereals, which will be very exciting in the future. So we've got loads of ideas, and finally we have the tool to play with.
Okay, so there's a lot of rumors going around with you have a second distillery on site. Is that legal?
Well, yes. So I mean, it's still on one site, so it's still Glenmorangie. So we could make, if we wanted to, Glenmorangie original in that distillery. That would be absolutely fine. Okay. But in a sense, you're right in that it's a distillery which can operate on its own if we want to.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you now have the opportunity to do all the experiments you want. So what's the first thing you're going to do?
Yes, so the first thing, we're just running some water through the stills.
Okay, so
right now,
running water there.
Just to make sure that everything works as it should. And then the next step, of course, is we want to try and produce the same spirit in this experimental distillery, which we do in the main distillery. So this will be our reference point.
Ah, okay.
So once we know that we've fine-tuned the equipment to produce Glenmorangie as we know it, then we have our reference point, and then we can start playing with lots of different things and see what sort of wonderful flavors we can create.
Yeah, that sounds really that you're going in with a professional view, not just like, yeah, we do everything, but you go with a reference point and then you look where you can go. Okay.
Yeah, it's super exciting. So we're trying not to jump into it, with both feet. Yes, we're trying to have some structure in how we run things.
Okay, that is really, really interesting. So you said so you start off with a mash tun. You do have a new mash tun in there?
Yes, yep, I have a mash tun indeed, yes.
Okay, and is the mash tun, is that also something you can do differently?
Yeah, so we also have a conversion vessel in there, which is something that allows us to cook cereals. So I guess, the question which you're going to ask is, so are you going to be making whiskey in there? What are you going to be making? So yes, the plan is to make whiskey. Whether these things eventually will turn out to be single malt whiskey, I mean, time will tell, and this is a question for the future. You know, the distillery is not even running yet. So.
But it's full production. So you have the mash tun, next up the wash bags, and
Yes.
probably also temperature control.
That's right. So we can, yeah. So I mean, one of the things that, of course, we want to do is to play with different types of yeast. And yeast operate within certain temperature limits. So being able to control the temperature will allow us to experiment with different types of yeast strains, which should create some exciting flavors.
Yeah, and we've already had a little bit of peak in there. It looks like a normal Glenmorangie still. And the still is also, you said you had some temperature control in there?
Yeah, so when you look at the stills from here, I mean, you'll notice things like stainless steel condensers, which you can see that from the outside. So that will have an effect on the amount of sulfur that comes through distillation, which eventually during maturation can create lots of interesting flavors, but also maybe less visible, although you can see it if you if you look closely. We can indeed control the temperature on the outside of the stills.
Ah, so it's kind of it sounds like a Lomot still.
A little bit, yes, in a way.
Or a cooling ring or something.
Yes, so the best way it's like a cooling jacket around it. So the best way we can describe what it does is, in a way, we can shorten or heighten the stills by controlling the temperature outside the neck.
Yeah, that's a big thing with Glenmorangie.
Yes, that's right. So our stills are already really tall, which allows us to produce a particularly elegant and fruity and floral type of spirit. So we'll be able to see, you know, what happens if we push this to the limit.
Even taller.
We could make the stills taller, theoretically, you know, using temperature control, or we could make them shorter. And you know, what does that do to the Glenmorangie style?
That would be a big of a pickle if you come out like, yeah, the best one is if we go even longer.
I guess it's not so much a question of, you know, better or worse. It's more we want to experiment and create lots of delicious flavors.
Yeah, it's there is no like best flavor in whiskey. It's just yeah. So how was it built? Who built it?
So we worked with an architect in France and a local engineering firm, and of course Forsyth, you know, who work with most distilleries near here, provided the equipment for us.
So Forsyth still and designed from Paris. Nice. So it's still distilling water. It's still in commission.
It's being commissioned right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
So is it going to be open to the public?
Probably not. No.
Oh, okay.
So the we want to have the freedom to work, you know, however we want inside the distillery. So the idea, we will certainly talk about it. We'll of course have whiskies to taste, you know, as soon as they're ready for us to share. But the current plan is not to take people inside the
So
distillery.
it's not a normal tour, like okay.
No.
So yeah, but still, it's really interesting to have that kind of distillery here, because I've not really heard of any experimental pot still distillery. I've heard of one experimental distillery, but with a column still, but not something like that with all the process in control of all the parameters.
No, and especially associated with one particular distillery. So this is very much for Glenmorangie, at Glenmorangie, which is, I guess, where, and of course all the bells and whistles we have in there, whilst, you know, some of these things might exist at other places, to bring everything in one place, right next to the existing distillery, I haven't heard of another place like this.
Yeah. So is any of the products gonna reach the market?
Yes, I mean, hopefully, yes. I mean, this is, you know, we want to have some fun in there, but the idea is indeed to bring new flavors, delicious flavors to the world. So hopefully there'll be some
So
good
there are
things
going to be
coming
more
out of
limited edition coming out
Yes,
from Glenmorangie.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
So,
that's good news.
I know why you're asking the questions, because you have an empty glass there and you're thinking, when are we going to be tasting this whiskey? So actually what we have here is a commemorative bottling. So this is a limited edition which we've released to celebrate the opening of the Lighthouse Distillery. This is only available at the Distillery Visitor Centre, by the way, so it's not something that unfortunately you can find on whisky.de. It's a a whiskey that was matured in both bourbon and sherry casks.
Mm.
But I suppose there is a link with the distillery, because when you look at the building, you can see mostly glass. Just behind the glass is something that looks like a wooden panel.
Mm-hmm.
And the wooden panel, it's a hybrid material so that it can work inside the distillery, but it was made using the casks that were used to mature this whiskey.
Ah,
So
okay,
this
cool.
is matured in both bourbon and sherry casks, mostly bourbon casks. It's a little bit cold to
yeah.
nose here.
Oh,
You'll hopefully get the
nice sherry.
the
Even
typical.
though it's really windy.
There's definitely sherry influence there. You also
Very
have
fruity.
the Glenmorangie character. Yes, very citrusy, particularly oranges and,
Yeah.
and lemon.
There's definitely Glenmorangie character in there, but the fruitiness is really strong, even with the cold and the wind.
Yeah, and you get dried fruits here as well, coming from the sherry casks.
Oh, I love it. Mm-hmm.
Plenty of sweetness in the form of vanilla and honey and toffee. I'm going to taste it.
Cheers.
Cheers. So it's quite syrupy on the tongue. It's a slightly higher alcohol strength. We bottled it at 48%. So you get that vanilla sweetness, the fruit notes that you mentioned.
But still very creamy as well.
Quite floral as well. I get some like rose water on the nose.
Yeah, that's what I like about the Glenmorangie. It's just a very nice whiskey to drink. It's just it's not that heavy, and it's just fruity, just a joyful drink.
Especially when you're outside. I think it comes alive when you're in a place like here, overlooking the Dornoch Firth, and it's partly the reason why we call this building the lighthouse, because it is a bit like a lighthouse by the sea.
Yeah, so that's the lighthouse from Glenmorangie. And yeah, so we've opened up tons of new information for our viewers. Thank you very much for having the interview with me.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you very much for watching. And if you like this video, then please feel free to share it with your friends. And see you next time.